Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final match of the FIDE Women's World Cup 2025, and also the final game, Humpy Koneru versus Divya Deshmukh. A lot of you guys have recommended this one, and sorry about no videos for the past few days. I have not been kidnapped or worse, as a lot of you have assumed, and thank you for the messages. I've just been on a nice vacation with the family, and now I'm back. So we're starting with a very nice game. We're not going to spoil it for anyone. Maybe some of you guys don't know what happened, but first two classical games ended in a draw. Game 3 of Rapid also ended in a draw, and this is now game 4. So whoever wins wins the event. But yeah, let's check it out. I basically just arrived, had a nice 3.5 hour drive. Was starting to look a bit feral, maybe like Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Always thought, he would look quite feral. But yeah, took a quick shave, and now I'm here. So let's dive straight into it and enjoy some chess. Humpy with white opens with pawn to d4. We have pawn to d5 by Divya, pawn to c4, e6, and knight to f3. So a standard queen's gambit declined. We have knight to f6. Pawn to g3 going for the Catalan, and d captures on c4. So they're playing a line that is very, very analyzed, and they will be playing it quite quickly, as you can see by the situation on the clocks. Bishop to g2 with bishop to b4 with check, bishop to d2, and pawn to a5. And this position has been played thousands of times. For example, even Magnus Carlsen has played it. He played it against, for example, Shahriar Mamedyarov in Tata Steel of 2022, where he won a very nice game, followed by just castling. But also there's a very nice, interesting game from 2010 that Magnus also played with white against former world champion Vladimir Kramnik, where Magnus continued with knight to c3. Today, it's considered an inaccuracy, already giving black quite a strong position. I don't know if that was the case back in 2010. Maybe Magnus just tried to surprise Kramnik a little bit, but it didn't really work out all that great, and Kramnik won that game. It is the same tournament, only it was called Chorus back in 2010. Now it's Tata Steel. But here after a5, we have the top move recommended by the engine, queen to c2, which is the top move that everyone plays today. Bishop captures on d2, we have knight captures, and pawn to b5, getting this beautiful queenside expansion, preparing bishop to b7 to counter the Catalan bishop, and now pawn to a4. If you're wondering about knight to e5, doesn't really do all that much. Yes, the rook is hanging, but the black wants to get this knight to d5, so it's basically playing right into black's hand. And now after b5, just pawn to a4, going after the b5 pawn, and after Divya's strong pawn chain on the queen side, pawn to c6. Now the defending b5, and also sort of messing with the light square bishop on g2, so it doesn't have a clear target. b3 and c captures on b3. We have knight captures and castles kingside. Again, all been played before, nothing new here. Castles kingside, bishop to a6, and knight to c5. We have b captures on a4, knight captures on a6, rook captures, also very nice, getting the rook off of that a8 square, and the rook captures on a4. We have knight b to d7, rook f to a1. The idea obviously is to go after the a5 pawn, and there is a game where queen to c7 was played. It was played in 2003 between Batuk Anand and Petr Spasic, and the game ended in a draw fairly quickly. But here we have queen to b6, which is a top move recommended by the engine, and it is now as of move 16 that we have a completely new game. So obviously Divya outprepared Humpy a little bit, as Humpy is already down to 7 minutes. So let's see what happens here. As you can see, there's a passed a pawn on a5. There's the potential passed c pawn. Maybe if you can somehow go after that d4 pawn. Of course, Humpy will put a pawn on e3, create a very nice center. The Catalan bishop, although perhaps not as many targets now, is still very, very strong. That c6 pawn is still a target, and that's pretty much it. It's an equal position. All depends on what you prefer. So okay, knight to d2. The idea is knight c4 attacks the queen, attacks the a5 pawn, and wins a pawn. Unfortunately for Humpy, Divya is in time to defend it. Rook f to a8 and pawn to e3. We have knight to d5 and knight to c4, attacking the queen and the pawn. And this is well, quite unfortunate if it would be quite unfortunate if you couldn't defend, but like I said, there's time to defend. Queen to c7 and queen to d2. Now the a5 pawn is attacked 4 times by the 2 rooks, knight, and the queen, but there is the very straightforward knight 5 to b6, forcing a trade as now the rook is hanging as well. You could capture on a5, but this would not be all that great, as knight captures on c4 also attacks the queen on d2, so you would just resign on the spot. So after knight 5 to b6, we have knight captures on b6, queen captures on b6, and queen to c3, again shifting attention to that c6 pawn. So knight to f6, and a rook to c1. Now the c6 pawn is attacked 3 times, so knight to d5. This is a weakness, and you have to defend it. Having a knight on d5 does accomplish that. And here, it doesn't seem like the light square bishop will be of much use, so Humpy decides to give it up for the knight. Bishop captures on d5. E captures on d5, and now we have rook c to e1. Sorry, not to e1, rook c back to a1, and pawn to h6. There's no danger here. The a5 pawn is defended, so Divya takes a moment to create a breathing room for her king. We have king to g2 and queen to b5. Pawn to h3, queen to b6, trying to, I guess, trying to make a Humpy burn time, as she's already down to a minute and a half. Rook 1 to a2. It looks like a preparation for a repetition of moves and calling it a draw, then going into Armageddon. We have queen to c7 and queen to c5. Grabbing more space, we have queen to a7, offering a queen trade, and queen back to c3. Now, you could also trade, for example, queen captures, rook captures. There's no real way for black to push here, but the king will come to d6, c5 will be played at some point. So I guess if anyone will be pushing here, it's black. But then if black over pushes, then you might have an advantage on the king side. So it can be played, but it's nothing spectacular. And as Humpy is the higher rated player, I think she wants to prove that she can hold this even with less time, and maybe even create chances where none exist. So queen back to c3 and queen to b6. We have rook to b2, attacking the queen. Queen back to d8, and now rook b back to a2. We have pawn to h5 and pawn to h4. We have pawn to g6 and rook back to a1. So again, seems like a repetition will occur. We have queen back to b6 and king to g1. We have king to g7, king to g2. We have queen to d8 and queen to c5. Rook 8 to a7 and rook 1 to a2. Again, played fairly quickly. We don't want to lose too much time. Rook to a8. We have rook to a1, queen to c7, and here Humpy, I guess, decided that no, we will not be calling it a day just yet, and she goes pawn to e4, which can still be played, but it's very, very tricky. Divya capture, of course, on e4. D captures on e4, but now you have to play queen c3. Queen c3, threatening some nasty discoveries. Let's say king to g8, and now after d5, as the queen on c7 is undefended, pawn to e3, and it's a really tricky game. For example, queen captures, c captures on d5. It's still, you're fighting against a passed a pawn and a passed d pawn, so you're not the one pushing here. And this is the best possible setup that white can get. So after d captures on e4, she played d5 immediately, not preparing it with queen to c3, and now Divya is just winning. Well, you could even pause the video and figure out what's the problem with this move. So have at it, while I give you a couple of seconds. So the move, of course, is queen to e5. The pinny becomes the pinner, if that can be said. I don't think it can, but you guys know what I mean. Of course, now the pawn cannot be captured. This is defended by the rook, and you cannot capture as the queen on c5 is undefended. I mean, it's it looks really weird. Like the queen on c7 is undefended. You play pawn to d5, such a great move, and then all of a sudden queen e5, and you just run into your own trap. But the funny thing is, as I guess Divya was also playing against Humpy's time, that she does not play it correctly. After rook to d1, there is a way to force matters here, but she doesn't find it. She plays c captures on d5. You have to prepare it with rook d8, And now again, you're pinning because the rook on d1 is undefended, the queen on c5 is undefended, and if you bring another rook to defend, well, you already gave up a pawn, so now it doesn't matter. You can trade everything. Rook captures, c captures, rook captures. You just move the queen. You don't really care, and you have the passed a pawn. Your queen f3 check is coming, and this is game over. So after rook to d1, she doesn't find it. She plays c captures on d5, rook captures on d5, and queen back to e8. Okay, attacking the rook on a4, we have queen to d4 with check, king to g8, and now rook to e5, attacking the queen, and the queen is nicely defending the rook on a4. We have queen to c6, now threatening some nasty discoveries along this diagonal. Queen captures on e4, and we have a trade of queens. Queen captures, rook e captures on e4, and just rook to f6. So no real way to start that pawn marching down the board. You have to try something else. But Divya is now also getting lower on time, whereas Humpy is still hovering around the 1 minute mark. We have rook to e5, preparing to win the pawn, and rook to f5, defending, offering a rook trade. Rook captures on f5, g captures, and king to f3. We have king to g7, king to f4, and now king to g6. Nicely defending. King to e5, and we have rook to a6, stopping the king from going up the board. King to d5, and now pawn to f4. Played when Humpy had only 31 seconds on the clock. And there are a couple of ways you could go about this. You could, for example, go king to e4. That's perfectly fine. And then if captures, you just capture, and okay, you can hold this. You can even play g captures on f4. You can mess up your pawn structure. This is also still fine. But in the game, rook captures on f4 was played, and now again, Divya has a winning position. She plays pawn to a4. We have rook to b4, pawn to a3, rook to b1, king to f5, going after the king side pawns, pawn to f3, cutting off the black king, and pawn to a2. We have rook to a1 and the rook to a3, going after the f3 pawn. And okay, how are you defending this? Of course, you can give up the a2 pawn to gobble up all of the king side pawns. Can you win this? King to d4, we have pawn to f6, just wasting a move, waiting where the white king will go, because if the white rook moves, you just promote and you win the game. So king to d5, now rook a4, cutting off the white king from going to the fourth rank. We have king to d6, rook a5, cutting off the king further. King to e7, rook to a6, cutting off the white king even further. We have king to d7, and now king to e5. Now the black king is coming down the board, and it doesn't seem like there's anything that you can do about that. Pawn to g4, Humpy has to try something. We have rook to a7 with check, and now look at this. King to c6 and king to f4. Perfectly natural move, but it gives away the advantage. I will show you guys how the game should have been played. Pawn to f5, but it's not easy to find this with such so little time on the clock. Point is that okay, if you capture, then all of white's pawns will easily be captured by the black king. Doesn't really do anything. And if you play g5, then it's a very unique winning set of moves. King to f4. King to b6, of course, you want to get rid of the rook to gobble up the pawn. Rook to a8, king to b7, you have to move the rook and still defend the pawn. g6, the white pawn now starts marching forward, hoping to become a queen. King captures on f3, g7, and now after rook to g4, stopping the pawn from queening, you just go rook captures on a2, and now rook captures on g7 with check, and of course, you are now winning. But after king to c6, she played king to f4, which sort of throws away all of the advantage. But g captures on h5. And this is now perfectly fine. King captures on f3. And now the solution to this, in order to not lose, is even more spectacular than the line that I've shown. So let's see how you would play this. How would you save this for Humpy? While I give you a couple of seconds. If you found this, you play endgames on a level unimaginable for most people. King to d5. it's as simple as that, but the solution is very, very tricky. Look at this: pawn to f5, king e5, pawn to f4. Still seems like there's no way you're saving this. King to f5, king to g3, king to g6. Now you can start advancing the h pawn as well. f3, h6, and now after pawn to f2, you play pawn to h7. Okay, rook to e8, you stop the queening. Pawn to h5. The only move that holds the draw, and you will see why. There's no move that black can make to improve the position, and you will get this pawn to h6 before you get the pawn all the way up the board, and then the pawn will be very, very close to promotion. And the trick is, if black tries to improve with king to g2, then you play h8 queen. And that's it. Now, after rook captures on h8, you will play rook captures on a2, and the f-pawn is pinned. So the black king can never go to the second rank. If you try king g1, then just rook a1 check. And if f1 queen, you simply trade. Captures, captures. You push the pawn, and the black rook will have to give itself up for the pawn, h7 or whatever. You will have to capture it, and it's going to be a draw by insufficient material. But after king captures on f3, pawn to h6 was played right away. I mean, finding king d5 with less than a minute on the clock, not easy to find, but you guys have the ability to pause the video, so congratulations if you found it. We have pawn to f5, and now king to e4 was better. Divya plays pawn to f5, which still can be drawn. King to d5, and now pawn to f4, and now the only move that draws, of course you are welcome to pause the video. Like I said, I cannot stop you. Is king to e5. It's always the king move, centralizing king d5, king e5, but pawn to h7 was played, and now Divya is once again winning. Rook captures on h7, rook captures on a2, and now king to g3, rook to a8, trying to put the rook behind the passed pawn, but just rook captures on h4. We have rook to g8 with check, rook g4, and there is no stopping this pawn. Rook to f8 is played, pawn to f3, we have king to e5, and pawn to f2. Rook to f7, we have king to g2, and he was in this position on move 75 that Humpy Koneru resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The pawn is promoting, and that's just it. Any move you make, rook f8, rook f6, king anywhere, f1 queen will happen, and then you will have to give up the rook and get checkmated in some 15, maybe 14 moves. So yeah, very nicely done by Divya. She defeated a lot of strong players here in the FIDE Women's World Cup 2025. Kesaria Migdalze, Teodora Ignac was defeated in classical time section. Zhuzhina is the only one to defeat Divya on her quest to win the FIDE Women's World Cup. Okay, they traded blows in the classical section, and then she defeated her in the rapid. Against Harika Dronavali, 2 draws in classical, then both victories in rapid. Against Tan Zhongyi, she defeated her in classical, and then against Humpy Koneru, like I said, 2 draws in classical, then third game a draw in rapid, and this is game 4. And this is how she won it, with a rating performance of 27.45, which is a very, very high. She wins 25 rating points. She's only 19 years old. She gets her Grandmaster title by winning this, and she also qualifies for the next FIDE Women's Candidates Tournament alongside Humpy Koneru. I think there are 5 candidates already and 3 yet to be decided. So yeah, very, very nicely played. A great showing. It was pretty tricky. Like I said, I think obviously as Humpy is higher rated, she considers herself the better player. So she had the white pieces in the last game. She had to push, or I mean, she didn't have to, but she wanted to win. And yeah, that's pretty much the story of this game. Little time on the clock, mistakes happen, and it was enough for Divya to win it all. So big congratulations to her, and we'll see how she does in the FIDE candidates, in the FIDE Women's Candidates Tournament, I believe in 2026. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any other games that you would like to see, use that hashtag suggestion, as that is how I mostly decide things. I would like to thank Ricardo Cordona Lopez, James White, Robert Pande, Christian Medical and Professional Services, and Peter Albert for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.